I think all eyes on the U.S. economy, but they are just as fixed on the U.S. southern border. It has not become, just because we're a border state in Arizona, we've been dealing with this for decades as a state, but it has become a national issue. And when you want to talk about the people that are out there protecting our borders and how they feel about things, we go to the experts. The Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council, Art Del Cueto, joins us. Thanks for being with us this morning.
Thank you. No, I appreciate you having me on.
Let's talk about the new policy, the new executive order signed by President Biden. We've seen an increase of the border traffic, people trying to beat this number. What do you make of this move? Is it sufficient? Is it going to have an effect at all?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it went into effect yesterday at midnight, correct?
Yes.
So not tonight, it was yesterday. And I can tell you it's had zero effect to begin with, because I'm even getting reports that I've talked to some agents, and they've said that a lot of it has failed because they'll go down to the border to release people back into Mexico, and Mexico says, well, we don't have an agreement. So Mexico themselves they were not taking the people that were getting sent back, right, unless they were from Mexico. So that's already caused a problem. They put the cart before the horse is the big deal. And let's call it what it is. It's political theater. That's what it was done for. Just to say, hey, look, we're trying, and at the same time point the finger to the other side of the aisle and say, hey, you guys failed to come up with something. So that's all it comes down to. And I understand the point that Congress and the Senate, they need to get together, they need to fix something, change the law in order to make it work. However, once you get to the position of you're going to use an executive order, at least use the executive order correctly and don't just resort to what a bill would have done anyway. And what I mean by that is instead of saying, hey, we're going to limit the number, this is what we're going to go down to, what President Biden should have done is he should have flat out said, anyone coming across is going to get detained. They're not going to get released. We're going to detain everyone. Obviously, you have to go through the court system and find out. But until that is settled and you go through the court system, don't release people. And I know people sit there and sometimes they listen to me say that and say, well, where are you going to house all these individuals? Look, that's how it worked under President Trump. That's why the numbers go down, because people that realize they do not have an asylum claim, they're not going to bother to even show up to come to the border because they know they're going to get detained. The only reason the numbers are high is because there's zero consequences for their actions. That's why the numbers are so high.
Art Del Cueto is joining us. He's the Vice President of the National Border Patrol Council. Has there ever been any conversation between your organization and this administration about policy and what would be effective in working? Have you been consulted? Have you had any open conversations about what you're seeing and what needs to be done with this administration?
So obviously there's been conversations with Secretary Mayorkas, but I mean, they've been conversations, and they've failed to follow any advice that has been given.
Let's talk about safety of officers. It's well over 400, I think around 450 this year. Border Patrol agents have been assaulted on the job. That doesn't get very much recognition, but this is becoming an even much more dangerous job than it's always been, hasn't it?
It is, and I'll tell you why it happens. Because when you're seeing the attacks, not just on agents, but you've seen the attacks on law enforcement across the country. I think of the attack that happened to the police officers in New York. And at the end, there was pretty much zero consequences. In fact, they released those individuals. They allowed them to roam free. Later on, they escaped and ended up not even showing up to court, and they ended up having to find them in Arizona, of all places. They were apprehended in Phoenix. But that sends a clear message to all the criminal organizations and the criminals and everything is, look, you're not going to face consequences if you attack law enforcement. That's what they see. And unfortunately, when you see that, you do have a rise in attacks on law enforcement in general, not just Border Patrol agents, because they realize, hey, if I can fight this guy and I escape, I won't get caught. And if I do get caught, they're not going to prosecute me anyway. So I think that's where a lot of the problem is a lot of these prosecutors, they need to start getting a little bit more active and taking some of these cases on agents. For the longest time, you'd hear, well, if the agent isn't really bleeding, they don't take the prosecution, which is just the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Insulting. I mean, it's not just ridiculous. It's insulting. It's insulting to the profession, and it's insulting, I think, to the citizens that would want to know that the people that protect us are protected by law as well. So let me ask you, why jump into the political side of this? in supporting former President Trump. Why jump into this? Why is it so important for you to be involved?
Well, I mean, I think it's not even just important as being part of the National Border Patrol Council. I think it's just important as an American. I almost feel like it is everyone's duty to be vocal and say what's going on. Fortunately, because of the title I possess, it's not Art Del Cueto that matters. It's obviously the title. People reach out because they have that title. And if you're going to have that title, you should be very vocal, and you should tell the American public, hey, this is the reality of what's happening, and we need to steer the ship in the right direction for the future of America. I mean, I have kids. I have grandkids. I want them to have a good future. I want them to have the future that I have. And then when you start seeing which way the country is headed, the disrespect towards law enforcement, the disrespect towards our nation's borders, just the chaos that you see, back and forth, and then you have an administration that denies the chaos is happening. I think we owe it as just an American to be vocal and jump into it and be able to tell people, hey, this is what needs to be done.
The former president has advocated for mass deportations if he's reelected. President Trump says if reelected, mass deportations are one thing that he's in favor of. From your position where you are, is that feasible to have those mass deportations? Can it be done with the level of law enforcement that we have? And if so, how?
It is, but you're going to have to go and work with other law enforcement agencies. Everyone's going to have to be pretty much on all hands on deck and find out. And I want to just be clear, because a lot of people hear mass deportations and a lot of the radical, left, they'll start attacking it and say, oh, look, they want to get into houses and do all that. No, when you're talking about mass deportations, what it actually comes down to is there was a lot of individuals that were allowed to come into the country and get released under this administration. You need to find out where those individuals are. And by mass deportations, you're going to have to go out there, find them, see if they actually have a true asylum claim. The majority of them, we already know, don't. So the majority that doesn't have one, they're going to have to get deported and sent back to their country. That's what you would think of and you would say when it's a mass deportation. But obviously people have flipped the script on one side of the aisle and said, oh, look, he wants to deport all these people because it's racial. It has nothing to do with race. It has to do with, hey, you need to find out where the people are that were allowed to come in and released. You need to find out their intentions. And you honestly owe it to them to find out if they actually have an asylum claim and go through the proper immigration paperwork in the immigration court system to give them that asylum if they have one. But that's what it comes down to when you're looking at a mass deportation, and it's going to take an all hands on deck approach. It's going to have even little things as, if you pull somebody over for any type of traffic violation, you're going to have to be able to call immigration officials and look into it and see if they have a case or not. So when you hear mass deportation, it doesn't mean breaking into houses and taking everyone out, because that's what the radical left wants it to sound like. No, it's giving people's day in court.
So one last question, and maybe this isn't your area of expertise, but we know about the children that have come in, the unaccompanied minors. Many of them, sometimes the numbers are approaching 100,000 of these children we cannot account for, that they have been sent to sponsor families with no follow-up. Has there been any movement on finding out where these children are and what conditions they're living under?
To my knowledge, no. Obviously, you turn over a lot of these individuals to the NGOs, to the nonprofit organizations. They're the ones that are in charge of finding out a family or relative in the United States, and that's who they release them to. But at the same time, you bring up a fantastic point. Under this executive order, what it has also done is it's given an exemption to the unaccompanied juveniles. That is where the drug cartels, the smuggling organizations are going to explode into, working with that. They're going to, send mass amounts of unaccompanied juveniles through the border because they realize that those individuals are not going to be sent back. And that alone is going to preoccupy agents in processing. And while the agents are preoccupied in that, that's when you're going to possibly have the parents of these unaccompanied juveniles or just regular, people that they're going to use to bring across to exploit some of these gaps in the border because agents are too busy trying to process all these other individuals. So what does this executive order do? This is going to even expand child trafficking, which is just horrific.
Mr. Del Cueto, I appreciate the time today as much as I know how busy you are, but thanks for spending time with us today and your advocacy, and we look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. That is Art Del Cueto. He is the VP of National Border Patrol Council.
Thanks for watching the Mike Broomhead Show. Catch up on Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast, and click the button in the middle to subscribe.